Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops, and the start line has found us. The Champions Classic has taken place at MSG, and we were not disappointed with the results or the play that took place inside the world's most famous arena. And we've been trying to give you a whole bunch of great guests to get you ready for the start of the college basketball season. But you know what it's time for? It's time to revisit the original co-hosts here. Mike Randall, where have you been for so long? We're so glad that you're home. The listeners have missed you a terrible amount. Please update the listeners. How's everything going? Or have you survived fantasy football?
Oh, I am back, Gus, and it's so good to be back. It's so good to come back with you, enjoying life, talking about the sport that is college basketball. I'm so ready to attack. I'm ready to attack coaches. I'm ready to attack players. I'm ready to attack all the mediocre college basketball analysis that's out there. I'm here, hot takes, definitive opinions, and never taking the L.
Oh, so good to be back with you. I think the listeners will enjoy this podcast tremendously for that reason alone. Listen, is there anything that you want to plug away for fantasy football here that you want people to be aware of besides, of course, following the podcast at SES Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course, and yourself at Randall Rant? Is there anything that you need to let the listeners know about?
Absolutely nothing. Folks, I am trying my best to turn this into a full year occupation for myself. That's what I'm doing. So fantasy football and college basketball go hand in hand. There's a little overlap, but really not a ton. So I am in that. You can follow me on Randall Rant. I am doing a weekly pod, the Fantasy Football Mailbag. I'm also doing a weekly betting pod on Fridays with Joe Pisapia, the pre-snap pod there for Line Star app. I have Action Network stuff going on, some stuff for betting pros, but of course, I'm here, the heart and soul, Gus and I, and we're ready to rock and roll. We're actually, Gus, entering year 3.
It's a little disturbing that we're at year 3, and to be honest,
honestly, year 4. It's actually year 4 because we went 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20. We're starting year 4. Crazy.
True. Wow, that is crazy. And I'm just glad we're talking college hoops. All right, Mike. So listen, we found the start line. What I'd like to do is just I'll give you a couple of takeaways that I had from MSG. Then you give us your 3 biggest takeaways from the Champions Classic, and we'll just start it off that way. We'll start off like old school. And I'll tell you right now that Kentucky backcourt is just like killer. Though they have 3 shot makers, they have ball handlers at the ready. They get tested every day by the returning sophomore Ashton Hagans in practice. So when Tyrese Maxey drops 26 and looks, or 28 and looks like the best player on the floor in either game at MSG and makes a huge 3 with the game on the line, I guess the new 3-point line doesn't really matter to him. And while Maxey was like the flat-out star in the second half, I saw a few things from Hagans on the offensive end that I did not see ever last season. He had a step-back jumper with the defense engaged. Hagans hit a floater in the lane off the dribble off some traffic. If Hagans is going to create and shot create for himself and run a solid dribble drive offense and be one of the best defenders in the nation, Matisse Thybulle ish level, then this Kentucky team is capable of winning the whole thing. We'll get to that later. And, Emmanuel Quigley was average at best in the showing, and the Wildcats hit all their free throws. The bigs, Montgomery, Richards, and the Bucknell grad transfer, Sestina, held the fort down in the paint. Coach Cal's gifted guards only turned it over 10 times, and they defended at a really high level. They held Sparty to under 40% from the field, under 20% from the extended three-point line, and they forced 16 turnovers. Mike, this team, I'm telling you, this team, holy smokes.
Yeah, I think most people had your reaction to this. There was someone we know, big Villanova fan, who came in the next day and is telling me guaranteed lock it to the Final Four. I like to remind everyone that at this point last year, Duke destroyed Kentucky and neither team made the Final Four. Okay, so I think everyone's got to slow down. Let's face it, teams like Kentucky, Gus, Duke, Kansas, Michigan State, for the most part, are pretty much looking at a Sweet 16 floor, right? Anything less than a Sweet 16 is probably a disappointment, right? So what we're really analyzing here is whether Kentucky will win 2 games, whether Duke will win 2 games. And neither team did that last year. I will say that Maxey looks like the type of player who can carry a team and really be a 5-star true impact freshman. That I agree with. I think it's too early to crown them. This fellow, what we know, this friend of ours, he's crowning them as national champions already, just like that. Really, guys? Well, there's Zion. There was RJ Barrett. I mean, at this point last year, Gus, I was so messed up. I was naming Quentin Grimes an All-American. That's what I was doing right now at this point. And he never had a better game than this. I will say Kentucky looked very good. I think I like the balance of having upperclassmen back for Cal. I think that's a nice fit there. They're going to have to get something out of Nick Richards. He's very hit or miss. He's very in or out. But I agree. Yes. I think Higgins, I think Quigley, I think all those guys look very, very good, very solid. And Maxey looks like the real deal and a true well-rounded scorer. 26 points, 3 of 7 from 3-point range.
He looked like the best player on the floor out of any of the 4 teams there. And I guess we also have to attempt to that. The sky is not falling for Michigan State. I mean, they need to get healthy. Langford out. They need to set rotations if Cassius runs into foul trouble again. That seemed to be one of the bugaboos there. They need to get some more from vets like Tillman and Henry. And I bet that Miles Powell from Seton Hall will have to earn every bucket when Michigan State visits the Rock later this month after seeing what Maxey did against them at MSG. So I guess your quick takeaway from Michigan State, is the sky falling, or are we still okay with them as /national championship contender?
Yeah, no, sky's not falling. I mean, this is what Izzo does. Right. He has a very tough schedule. He gets a bunch of underachievers to play better together. I'm annoyed at myself because without Langford, it's really a tough matchup for them. Langford has never been there, though. He hasn't been there for the majority of the last 2 years. So he'll get them going. It'll be fine. It's fine. It's a young team, and he always gets them better as the year goes on. So I guess I'm saying fight the knee-jerk, folks. Fight the knee-jerk reaction. Please don't tell me Kentucky's winning the national title and Michigan State's not even making the Sweet 16. Can we calm down, please? Let's see what happens. But I will tell you, Maxey and Kentucky look good.
They did look good. I love your rationale. Okay, so let's go to Kansas Duke. I think I had this one totally wrong. I went in thinking that Kansas would be really dominant here, and then Duke comes in and pulls off the win. The Jayhawks turned it over 28 times, allowing folks, from the fog to yearn for that Snoop Dogg show that was on last month. Mike, does Kansas have issues at the lead guard spot? I mean, you mentioned Dotson. Or is Duke that good on the defensive end, or maybe is it a combination of both? And I guess my question to you is, just how good will both of these teams be moving forward? Is Duke going to score enough? And is Kansas going to take good enough care of the ball moving forward if both of these teams are going to look at possible Final Four and winning those last 2 games like you talked about?
Well, I think Duke, nice win for Duke. And whenever you're getting points with Duke, I guess you should take it, right? It ended up being Kansas by 2, which was kind of odd. Right. I thought Kansas with the veterans would be able to take Duke out a little bit, especially because they don't have the offensive firepower that they had last year. Carey was fine, hurt. I mean, it's okay. The question is Coach Krzyzewski better with good but not great talent? Do they work together more? Or since he couldn't get there with Zion, Barrett, and Reddish, is he going to get? Is he going to really get there with this? So that's the question. They look like a team. They look well rounded. Again, he has 0 bench because the problem is you're not going there if you're going to sit the bench. That's where Cal has the advantage. Cal gets 36 stars worth of players, right? Coach K gets 1, Coach K gets 2, Coach K gets 3, and then he's got Goldwire getting 0 points. That's what Coach K has. So his schematic is really to ride 3 top players. Last year, didn't make the Final Four. In fact, hasn't made the Final Four in a while. Okay. So I don't know if this team is going to be better or not because he really has to make them meld together. Look at his bench. He had 9 points from Alex O'Connell. He's good because his mom says he's good. Jack, Jack White, DeLaurier. Okay, fine. Let's see what happens. Kansas will be fine. He'll get it together. Remember, this is a Kansas team, Gus, that got a lot more players than they thought they were going to get. They were a little worried, and I will say this all year. The key to them is Agbaji. Agbaji has to play well.
Totally.
He's LeGerald Vick. LeGerald Vick started the year on fire and then left the program and is gone forever now. Agbaji is the guy who's got to come through because he gives them a wild card. Garrett's solid too. Defender, can score a little bit, but that's the guy they need because Azubuike will be okay, but he'll get in foul trouble. That's what happens.
And I think the issue that they're going to have to figure out that, North Carolina has figured out, that Gonzaga has figured out is if you're going to play with these two bigs, like you're going to force the other team's cards. So if they're going to stick with that, then they better figure out like this turnover problem, because a lot of those turnovers, I mean, obviously the post to post passing is not, Zag-esque like it is with like Tilly or Hachimura, like that they're not that schooled, they're not that skilled. So if they're going to play with these two bigs, they got to figure this stuff out and maybe take a little less risk around the basket and maybe just go up strong and hope for some foul shots. And can they make their foul shots? So
right.
I think they have a couple things to clean up.
Yeah, and again, this year we don't have the top of high-end talent that we've had in the past. So I'm not as concerned that when I watch these games, I wasn't as wowed off the screen. I mean, listen, we'd love to have a player that's really great in college, but is not going to be a good pro, Zion Williamson. But, we all can't have that, So I think we have a lot of really good players that I saw, with Maxey being the one who could be great this year so far from what I've seen.
Correct. And I think what I saw from Higgins in the first half, there were some offensive highlights from him and some offensive snippets where that did not happen last year. Like he was not able to shoot that floater last year. He was not able to shoot that step back jumper with the defender in his face and nail that thing. So and again, I think Kentucky, and we'll get to this a little bit later, if Kentucky's going to play with those three guards and do that, like that's going to be a little bit crazy. All right, Mike, you know what I'd like to hear? I'd like to hear your 2 cents on our interview segments that we've had the last couple of podcasts. So I'll shoot a name and like one little thing, and you give us a little, give us your feedback on what you thought happened in the interview and maybe what you took away from it. So Matt Norlander from CBS was nice enough to come on, and he really likes our guy Anthony Lamb, and he really liked Jordan Ford and Sam Merrill. So was there anything you took away from the Matt Norlander interview where we talked a number of different things, and we even talked some music at the end.
Norlander's great. First of all, superior job. I mean, you on your own here nailed Norlander, Doster, Fawcett, Reegs, Jordan Sperber, and Brian Mull. I mean, I don't even know what that means. I mean, that's a murderer's row of people. And people, you don't realize, folks, if you don't have your own podcast and you have been trying to get these guys, the key is, first of all, to get them to even respond is number one, but Gus is a master of that. Number two, coordinating a time that works out for your schedule and their schedule, otherwise known as whatever works out for their schedule, is not easy also. And then, of course, planning the show sheet. So I got to give Gus credit here. Kudos. It's not easy. I know for a fact it's not, and he killed it. Love the interview with Norlander. He's one of the best in the business. I agree with Jordan Ford. I think Jordan Ford is a special player. You have been driving this bandwagon before anyone else even got on. Okay. He is multidimensional. His shooting, I think, has improved a little bit. His on-the-ball defense is superior. My only problem with that, and Norlander was talking about them, folks, St. Mary's got to play defense. Okay. And they don't have Jock Landell inside. So they're going to be a team that is really good at scoring, really good at the pick and pop. Fitz can make threes. Everyone's got a place. And then you get pounded inside because you're soft. That's St. Mary's problem, because Gonzaga has pushed them around year after year. So this year, I know they can score. They've got a lot of skilled players. I'm sure they can. The flare screen. I mean, how good are they at the flare screen, Gus? Oh, my God. But are you going to
especially with Kuzi, helping out in the
it's just so beautiful. The UCLA cut. I mean, I love it, guys. The problem is you're a donut. You have a hole in the middle, and you're not tough defensively. Now, if they can play defense, they're going to be an issue. But I love the Jordan Ford call, and of course Anthony Lamb, a guy that we've been talking about since his freshman year. So it was nice to hear you mention him as well.
Yeah, I was very happy to hear that he was on board with that, because if we go back and hit the rewind button on Anthony Lamb, his freshman year when they played Purdue in the first round of the of March Madness, he matched Caleb Swanigan like punch for punch. Like he put up 20 points against Caleb Swanigan, and he was an All-America that year. So like there is no scare, there is no fear in Anthony Lamb's game. I'm excited to watch him like expand his game even further. With Rob Doster from NBC, he was all aboard the J Huff bandwagon and a couple of other items too. But was there anything you took away from Doster? I mean, we talked a little bit like Kansas and Snoop Dogg and SB 206 too. But was there anything you took away from that particular interview and things that maybe you think that the listeners should highlight or pay attention
Well,
to?
Doster's interview was great. And of course, I agree with Jay Huff. Everyone's sleeping on Virginia. Grant, again, I've been I'm tracking my bets this year, Gus, on a spreadsheet. So every single wager that I make that you can follow on Action Network, by the way, on the app, I have tracked. Okay.
Wow.
The unders are hitting at an incredible rate right now, off the chart. Of course, tonight they ended up going 5-4, and I picked two games that hit the over by 1 point each. So that's really fantastic. But the Virginia under was the easiest bet in Vegas. They got to get something out of Huff. He can be better than Jack Salt, and they're going to need that because they don't have a Kyle Guy and a player like that. They're going to be the whole the whole is greater than the sum of the parts type of team. But Jay Huff is a guy that we've talked about, has a lot of potential. He's got to get a little tougher, but that Virginia team's defense is just as good. Do not sleep because they don't have Jerome, Guy, or Hunter.
Correct. Even though they lost those three guys to the NBA, I mean, Huff put up a double-double against Syracuse. I mean, and they held Syracuse to 34 points, and Cole Anthony had 34 points. So we're going to give shouts to Luke Neer from the ACC Degenerates podcast. He was on the J Huff bandwagon last year when we talked to him. We are just going to climb on board, and we are all aboard the J Huff bandwagon. We talked to Eric Eric Fawcett from Gator Country. We talked a lot of Florida, and I'm going to tell you right now, Mike, there's a couple of places where I've seen Florida ranked number 1 preseason. So it's not like, we were talking to, it's not like we were talking to Eric for no reason. We were talking to Eric about possibly the number 1 team in the country and a Final Four team. So what did you take from Eric? And are you buying on Florida? Are you in on the Gators?
Here's the deal with Florida. We know Mike White coaches defense. Okay. And I think everyone is rooting for Andrew Nembhard to become this great player. They like him. They like Nembhard. Really showed a lot. What did he show last year? What did he show? Could a couple threes. Everybody starts screaming. Okay. Guys, Nembhard has to step up and become a top 10 point guard, a team on a top 10 team. That's what I want to see. I agree with Blackshear transferring. I think that gives them a lot of savvy, a lot of moxie, but the book's out on Mike White. This should be a big year for them. So people like Florida. They're a fun team to root for, SEC, all that stuff. I guess I just want to see more from Nembhard. I want to see it. I think people are projecting that the leap will happen before I've seen anything that tells me it's going to. And I know that Eric talked about the fact that people said he wasn't a good jump shooter, but that was only off the dribble, like drive and kick. He was very good.
That was a great point by Eric. Yeah.
It's a great point. It's like saying that a center is not really good at scoring near the basket, but if he scores exactly 12 feet out from the basket, he was good. No, Nembhard, you have to shoot off the dribble. You're the point guard for the team. That's an integral skill. So he has to take a leap on that. Can he? Absolutely. Can he be better than Ashton Hagans, who had 35 steals against North Carolina, went on the side of a milk carton for the rest of the year? Absolutely. He can totally do that. But I want to see it first. I'm going to be Missouri with Florida. Does that make any sense? Missouri.
Yeah, you want them to show you. I got you.
I want it. I want it to happen. I like them, but I got to see it first.
Okay, so when we talked to Reegs from Barstool, he gave us a really cool underrated Final Four team in LSU. Talked a little bit about Xavier and said that, yeah, they could be a threat in the Big East to win the whole thing. And then also told us, he and I talked about, and he kind of convinced me that Kentucky can win this whole thing because they're really special this year. So what did you take away from what Reegs told us, maybe about LSU, maybe about Kentucky, or maybe about Xavier?
I agree with LSU. Sometimes it's addition by subtraction. It would be nice to see Xavier come around. I think Xavier's got a little bit of a ways to go because I don't think they're the best team in Cincinnati anymore. I was really impressed with Cincinnati against Ohio State earlier this week. And he's right about Kentucky. He certainly is going to Kentucky early on. And the key, again, is this. Remember, folks, Calipari's only won 1 title. Right. He only has 1 title there. Now, that's a lot. Bill Self only has 1 title. Okay. So it's not like everyone gets 2 or 3, but 1 more should do it. And he does look like he has a balance of upperclassmen and freshmen, which, by the way, I think you need now. I don't know if the ship has sailed, and it may have, on all Frosh winning titles. I don't know about that because it's never happened. Right.
Right. And unless you go to that Ohio State team that had Conley and Odin, they made a Final Four, and you're going to that Okafor team with Duke and Winslow, you could point those directions, but I still think that like you said, there's still that another game to win. There's an additional game that you need to secure. And that's not always easy for a class, a program, a team, a school that's going to be, dependent on freshmen. And luckily, like Kentucky has a couple of those upperclassmen, whether it be Hagens or Richards, that they can kind of rely on a little bit, or Sestina from Bucknell. When we talked to Brian Mull, we talked a little CAA, and the CAA, my hometown conference, has like two legit NBA players in Riller and Knight. Like Grant Riller is going to score 25 points a game, and Knight is going to put up double-double after double-double for William and Mary. So, Mike, what did you take away from the under the radar, or maybe some of the mid-major conferences that we talked about with Brian Mull, which is always an awesome, fun conversation?
Yeah, Brian's great because we love the mid-majors here, folks, at our hearts deep down. We're a mid-major small school podcast. I talked about how I first started liking college basketball because in 1985 when Villanova won, and toilet paper my dad hung from the ceiling with V's on it. So we are a mid-major pod. The CA is a great conference. He talked about, Nathan Knight we talked about, senior from William Mary, been talking about for a long time. Yep. Grant Riller's been fantastic for a really long time. I like Eli Pemberton at Hofstra. I think he can step up and do some things. And whenever you lose that best player, we've seen this multiple times, you lose the star player, but then the team can still improve, and they're well coached. And your guy, Matty Lewis down in James Madison. So they have some good players there. Totally agree. I think Riller's going to be the player of the year, no doubt, in the conference, but I like it. This is a year because, Gus, your upper echelon teams are not over the top with talent. This is a year that we could get another run by a VCU-esque like team. It could absolutely happen, and that team could come from the CAA.
It could. I don't know if it will, but it could. And then we talked to Jordan Sperber as well from the Solving Basketball podcast. And, we kind of nerded out on a whole bunch of stuff. And we talked about teams you can trust. He gave New Mexico State as a team that you really need to keep an eye on. So what did you take away from that particular interview? Was there anything that like you kind of keyed in on and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense?
Jordan's great, and if you're not following him, you should do so already. I agree about New Mexico State. They've been a team that's made the tournament but hasn't really made a lot of noise recently, so you're looking for that team to get that win and to move forward. I'm done with the small schools like Nevada and things like that. By the way, again, I can't wait to bet against Musselman at Arkansas. Oh, my goodness, I can't wait. I'm going to do it every game. I'm going to do every single game. But,
here we go.
I think that if you're going to make a run from a school like that, you do have to be like Utah State, which, by the way, again, your boy Frey out in Montana State gave a whole lot of trouble to Utah State. Very impressive performance. He had like 36 points.
Yeah,
but Utah State is well coached. They run good offense. But again, the problem with the small schools like a New Mexico State, like a Grand Canyon, like a Utah State, is if they lose one piece, that's a big deal for them. So right. no Keita against for Utah State really made a difference against Montana State. I don't know if they would have covered or not. They probably wouldn't have because Frey was off the charts. But you have to stay healthy with those teams. So my one concern is when you're really talking about a really big outlier, like not a mid-major, like a middling major, okay, you really have to make sure they stay healthy and at full strength.
Totally agreed. So let's go to a couple other takeaways that we've, some opening week or whatnot. Mike, I feel like Purdue is going to be fine this year. I feel like I was a little worried after losing Carson Edwards. And we talked a little bit about this with Jordan Sperber. That lineup is gigantic. I don't know if you've seen their stuff. Like there is just length everywhere. Harms is a monster at the rim. He even hit a 3 in rhythm. They're going to be tough to score on. Eastern as a lead guard at the point is really interesting if he remains healthy. So I think Purdue, when we talked about Jordan, like just one of those teams that you're going to trust along with like Gonzaga and Villanova. After getting my eyes on Purdue and seeing how they're going to operate and seeing how long they are at every position and the diversity that they have 2 lefties in the starting lineup, which I don't think that's a thing, but like it's definitely tricky. And they're going to defend really well. And the type of offense they're going to run, they're going to be really efficient. So I was really impressed with Purdue right off the bat. And I think the first go-around, and you mentioned this a little bit, Mike, the first go-around for these teams when they're ranked for the first time is always tricky. And if you remember the last 2 years when we played this game in Nevada, when they scratch the bottom of the top 25, and then they lose that game to New Mexico, or they lose that game on the road to San Diego State, or whatever the case might be, once that number appears next to your program name in the crawl, the target seems to get exponentially bigger and expand beyond belief. And we saw that in St. Mary's. We saw that with Utah State. We saw that even with Ohio State. So, Mike, a couple of takeaways from Purdue and maybe St. Mary's, Utah State, or maybe Ohio State?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Purdue. I mean, I think people like Purdue because remember, Carson Edwards there was a negative vibe going on there for a while between him and Painter. You know, he came across, if you read between the lines, a little bit of a diva. Okay. So there was some issue going on between him and Painter. So Painter may actually have a better team right now for his style, lunch pail gang. It's just tough for me to see this team outperforming last year's, which by the way came in 2 seconds of knocking off Virginia. And then who knows how far they could have went.
Right.
But in the Big Ten, I'll put them a notch behind Michigan State. I'll put them a notch behind Maryland. I do think Holtman is a huge coaching advantage with Ohio State. I like them. And for some reason, I'm massively high on Illinois. So I kind of put Purdue in the second tier. Do I think they're going to finish in the top 3 of the Big Ten, which is really the question? Right now, I'm going to say no, because I'm going to have to see them score on the road. Harms to me is a trick. I mean, he's fine. Do I think he's going to turn into Isaac Haas? No, I don't.
No.
But, you know, he does a lot of things defensively, length, coming off the weak side for the block. So I have to see more in them. I want to like St. Mary's, Gus. I really do. I put a future bet in on them. It's plus 150 to win the WAC. So, you know, Gonzaga obviously is minus. So it was the lowest I could get for them as a underdog other than Gonzaga. Right. But they got to play defense, and I got to see it. It's hard for me to like St. Mary's when they have no post player. They're going to have a strong guy inside, and I don't think they have that yet. But that's the key to me. But they can score, and Jordan Ford can win games by himself, a la Carson Edwards.
He sure can, and keep in mind that they may not have the post player that's going to defend at the rim, but their pace of play is like a quasi extra defender. They're not going to. I mean, you saw the overtime score against Wisconsin. I mean, they both teams scored in the 60s. Like, and that's the way St. Mary's is going to play, and that's the way Randy Bennett wants to coach, and he really wants to like isolate and manipulate every offensive possession. And he's going to let Jordan Ford and Fitz like make great decisions on the offensive end, and that's what's going to happen. So even though they don't have that rim defender or that tough guy inside, they do have a system that allows them to kind of, you know, control, manipulate how the game is going to roll every time. And I'll tell you right now, it is. I mean, it's always been a collision of styles when St. Mary's and Gonzaga like face each other, and this year it's going to be even more so because I think St. Mary's knows they're on lockdown and knows they need to play their way to get past them, and Gonzaga and Few is just going to be like, okay, you know what? We're just going to try to put up 90 on you. We're going to try to run it, and we're going to try to throw 90 points up on the board. Deal with it. So I'm totally looking forward to that matchup. I think that matchup is absolutely fascinating this year, especially because it's possible St. Mary's might have the 2 best players on the floor in that matchup for the first time ever with Fitz and Ford. I mean, no slight to Kitzbühel or Tilly or anybody else on the Gonzaga roster, but let's call it like it is. Like, those 2 guys legitimately might be the 2 best players on the floor in that game, so it's going to be fascinating. Another thing, Utah State, like, they have that number next to their name, and they barely escape. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And maybe as bettors, like, that's something to pay attention to too. If you have that new team that sneaks into the top 25 and has that urgency next to their name, maybe you take the under. Maybe you take them not to cover. Maybe you take them not to win that game, because that's a real type of pressure that exists every week, every year, and every Monday when that top 25 gets released. Every team feels that pressure. Every coaching staff feels that pressure.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And then, like I said, I think the key is watching these small schools develop and projecting to see whether they have the camaraderie, whether they have the balance. And I still believe, Gus, that small schools have to play defense if they're going to make a run. I can't have a small school that outscores people. It's not going to happen now because the talent differential is there. So they're going to have to play defense, and that's what you need to see.
Look, it's going to get one game for you. Like, take a look at Marshall, right? Like, take a look at Coach D'Antoni. You can get one game in March with that type of system, but you're not going to go on an extended run unless you're completely balanced. So I totally agree with you. A couple of wagering takeaways from the opening week of college hoops. I feel like you were kind of keyed into a couple of things. What did your Action Network mind see with the opening day of the sport? And, you know, what did you see that you're like, yeah, you know what, this might be a trend moving forward for for the next couple of weeks, or this is something we should really pay attention to?
The two things I want to look at is I don't think that Vegas has adjusted yet. Those college basketball spreads get very, very good once we get to February and March. But early on, if you know these teams, particularly these small schools, you can get some huge advantage there. First day, I kind of bonked. Utah State was no good. That did not work out for me at all. That was a tough loss, which frustrated the heck out of me. I also took a chance because I liked Fresno. I liked the coach coming back from last year. He did a nice job, brought over the defense from San Diego State. They go up there to Oregon. I know they have Pritchard. I know they have the high school backcourt, but I didn't think Okoro was going to play, which means they wouldn't have a guy above 6'8". So I took the under there, and I took the 13.5. But of course, they lose by 14, which is immensely frustrating. The unders have hit at an incredible rate. I lost a Baylor under on the first day because they made 18 threes. I'll take my chance with that every day of the week. But the unders are something like at a 65% clip. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is if you pay attention, you can get some nice numbers there. I did win on the Ohio State -6 against Cincinnati. My argument was Holtman at home. With a veteran team returning, Brannon is new. He's going to try to change the style. So instead of down screen, back screen, now we're looking to get out a little bit. I was impressed by Jaron Cumberland. He played very, very well, but I got a lucky cover there with Ohio State. And then, of course, I took Virginia -3 against Syracuse, a Syracuse team that is really, really young. They play a zone that's not going to fool Virginia, and Virginia has a lot of players back, so that was an easy cover. So early on, doing well, but those are my two takeaways. Go with the under and watch out for those small school lines that Vegas just doesn't have a clue on.
And we, you talk about UVA there, and Jay Huff had a double-double. Welcome aboard to the bandwagon, everybody. And then if we're going to correlate that, we can just go stay straight in the ACC and just look at Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony equals Syracuse in the box score 34 points. And it seems like a positive place to initiate some All-America talk, Mike. Let's just tell the listeners, I'll give my All-America team. I'm going to start with my man, Cole Anthony. And you tell me what I got right, what I got wrong, where I lost my mind, who I might have left out. And then, after we go over the first, second, and third team, I'll just read off a couple of honorable mentions and other guys that were kind of in the mix that I had in the notebook. I'll even pull the notebook up right here so we can just read right off of it. First team, pretty simple, except for I think the last person might be slightly surprising. Cole Anthony's my first guy. And he was my first guy prior to the blow up against Notre Dame, the freshman from UNC. We've seen what Kobe White has done at the point guard position in a Roy Williams type offense. We've seen what Joel Berry has done. We've seen what Marcus Page has done. Nobody's been as talented as Cole Anthony running the point guard position for a UNC type offense. And I think this is just scratching the surface. And I think this is going to be commonplace. I think the 30-point game might show up a little bit more often. I think the 11 rebound game might show up. The 8 or 9 assist game is going to show up really frequently. So I have him on the first team. I'm going to put Marcus Howard there from Marquette as well. I think he's going to put up bananas numbers. I think playing alongside Kobe McEwen, I think both of those guys are going to create space for each other on either side of the court, and they're going to put up a ton of points. And I think because he puts up a ton of points, that's going to put him on a first team. I think if you don't have a first team without Cassius Winston from Michigan State, I think that's silly. Even though they took the loss the first game at MSG, I think he's going to continue to be one of the best players in the country and one of the best leaders in the country. Jordan Nwora from Louisville, I think he's going to blow up and average over 20 points a game. He's going to be in the running for player of the year in the ACC. He's going to have to beat out Cole Anthony, obviously. So I think he's going to be – I think Louisville is going to be a top 10-ish team all year. And if they're going to be a top 10-ish team all year, I think he'll be the reason why. And then I really was in on Ashton Hagans. I know it'd be very easy to put Maxey here at this point, but I was in on Ashton Hagans previously, so I'm going to put him on my first team as well. Mike, what did I get right? What did I get wrong with the first team there with Anthony, Marcus Howard, Winston, Jordan Nwora, and Ashton Hagans?
You know that the freshman's going to get on there, so I think Cole Anthony is totally fine. And one of the biggest surprises from last year was that North Carolina bonked, because we talk how Roy doesn't bonk 2 years in a row. So It's kind of weird to see him bonk again. So this could be the year for old Roy. You never know. Marcus Howard, of course, lethal scorer, and just disappointed that Marquette ended the way they did last year. We went out to Milwaukee and just still frustrated about that. Losing to Georgetown with the Big East on the line, something like that. That was terrible. Cassius Winston, of course, that's an easy one. That's a slam. I love Jordan Wara. I think Louisville is very good. I think they're balanced. I think Chris Mack can absolutely ascend here to be a top 5 team because, like we said, the talent is not there. Don't be surprised if Louisville has more talent than Duke on paper when they play. Keep that in mind. I just don't see Higgins getting there. I don't like, Gus, when I read in the previews about players that have to be motivated. Well, I hope he keeps his head on straight and focuses the whole year. That's kind of like a red flag, like fireworks go off when I read that. He's a talented kid. I thought he turned a corner with the big game with all the steals there. I think it was against North Carolina, like I said. And then he really wanted the tank. So wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make it there. But it's certainly very solid first team across the board.
All right, let's go to the second team. We got Miles Powell, our hometown Seton Hall Pirate, as a senior. I put him as the first player on second team. We'll put James Wiseman, the freshman from Memphis, who you mentioned motor stuff. I think that's a concern with him. Is he going to play, as consistent on the defensive end as he does on the offensive end? I'm going to put Jordan Ford here from St. Mary's on the second team. I think he's going to put up bananas numbers with unbelievable shooting metrics. And I think the combination of the bananas numbers, shooting metrics, and St. Mary's success as a team, maybe grabbing one of those wins against Gonzaga, is going to put him there. I felt like I need to put somebody from Kansas somewhere, so I put Devin Dotson here. So maybe I fell into your trap that you fell into last year. And then you mentioned my last member, Jaron Cumberland from Cincinnati earlier, where if he's healthy enough, he can make first team. I mean, I think the key thing with Cumberland is he going to get healthy enough, and is Cincinnati going to gather enough wins inside the AAC? So I got Powell, Wiseman, Jordan Ford, Dotson from Kansas, and Cumberland from Cincinnati on the second team. What did I get wrong? What did I get right? What are you going to argue with?
Powell's fantastic. He carries that entire team and wins despite his coach. So that's fantastic. There's the first dig of the year, by the way. James Wiseman, headliner of the top recruiting class in the country. So it's certainly reasonable to see him in there, second or third team. Jordan Ford is a second team All-American talent. But the problem is St. Mary's going to get to that level. If they split with Gonzaga, I don't know if that's enough. Gonzaga players have enough trouble when they're dominant getting on like a first or second team All-American, unless you're Rui Hachimura. So Jordan Ford is going to have to ball out, and that team's going to have to produce. Do I think he's one of the top 10 players in the country? I could see it. Do I think he will get the votes to be on second team? Probably not, because I just don't buy that St. Mary's is going to be 19-1, which unfortunately, because of the East Coast bias, they'd probably have to be. Devin Dotson, you fell into my trap. I went through it with Quentin Grimes. It's just possible that they don't have a player there that is deserving of first or second team. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know if Dotson can score enough, which is kind of what you have to do to be on this team, which is why I think Jaron Cumberland's an excellent pick. He could absolutely put up 25, 26 points a game. And in a year where everyone is good but not great, and you don't have those elite, definite talents, I mean, would you be shocked if Jaron Cumberland outperforms James Wiseman? No. So, yeah, I like seniors. I like seeing them up there. I like big scores. And you have three of them right here that I can see: Howard, Powell, and Cumberland. So I'm going to support that across the board.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and so the third team, I went a little bit rogue on a couple of things here. We're going to go Alpha Diallo from Providence. I think that's the team that might surprise in the Big East, and I think he might do enough of everything: scoring, rebounding, helpers, defensive end, switchability on the defensive end on the perimeter. I think he might be one of those guys that kind of explodes on us as a senior. And then, we end up seeing him being drafted at the end of the first round. And we know how Coach Cooley really puts a lot of ownership on his players and lets them make a ton of decisions on the offensive end. And I think he'll do the same thing with Diallo. I think you got to put Blackshear from Florida somewhere. And so I'm going to put him on the third team. I was way on Peyton Pritchard last year, and I'm not getting off that bandwagon. I'm going to put him on the third team as well. I feel like you got to put Trey Jones somewhere. He's here on the third team. And then I'm going to put Anthony Edwards from Georgia. And we've seen what, happened at Indiana when, they had Zeller. So we've seen what Victor Oladipo has done. So I think if Edwards is going to get that kind of responsibility on the offensive end, I think that he finds his way onto a team. And if Georgia can get some wins inside the SEC and be a viable team all year, I don't see why he wouldn't sneak his way onto a third team too. So I have Alpha Diallo, Kerry Blackshear, Peyton Pritchard, Trey Jones, and then Anthony Edwards from Georgia. Mike, what did I get wrong? What did I get right?
I think Diallo is interesting. His Swiss Army knife-like guy like Oladipo. I kind of like that. I thought that was a very original pick. If Florida is as good as people say it is, it's going to be Kerry Blackshear. It's not going to be Andrew Nembhard. I'm just going to say that right now. So can Blackshear be a scorer leaving Louisville with the shackles off of him everybody playing 17 minutes? We have to see. Peyton Pritchard's fine. You're higher on him than me. I just don't see him as a big-time scorer. I think there's going to be a lot of 12-8 games, 12-7 games. And he's a very valuable player. He's probably one of the most valuable players in the country to his team, but he's going to have to put up some more points. And I do think last year his scoring was a disappointment. He came on during the tournament, but he really could have scored a lot more, even though they played at a slower pace. That was a team that really struggled on offense, but certainly a great leader, certainly an integral part of his team, very valuable guy, and could be, Pac-12 Player of the Year. Trey Jones is fine. You're going to have a Duke guy on there. I don't see how you do your first three teams without having a Duke guy, so you got to put somebody in there, right? And Trey Jones is the most logical candidate. And Anthony Edwards, we have to see. Do I think Wiseman and Edwards will both sneak on here? No. I think that people are going to assume that because of the hangover of Frosh dominate. I'm going to have to see that. That's a tough conference, the SEC. My love for the SEC. So I think that one's a tough one. But I like seeing seniors, and you have three of them on third team.
Yeah, I tried to put one freshman on each team and not totally go freshman dependent. So we went, Cole on the first team, Wiseman on the second team, and Anthony on the third team. So I didn't want to try to totally overload the teams with freshmen, but I think it makes sense. So we can. I can share a picture of the rest of the guys that we had on in the notebook.
You should put that on Twitter. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. A couple of the guys, Najee Marshall, Jarek Harding from Weber State, Anthony Lamb, of course, Remy Martin, Grant Riller, Caleb Wesson. So, we have a bunch of guys like that in the notebook. All right, Mike, let's get to two more things, and then we'll get out of here. We'll do some Final Four picks, and then maybe we'll give the listeners a couple of games to look forward to next week. How's that sound? Does that sound all right?
Give me your Final Four. Let's hear what your Final Four is. We got your All-American team. Give me your top team coming across the board.
Okay, so I'm going to stick with, we talked about Kentucky on the lead-in. We covered why they're going to be really special this season. I'm going to stick with them. I know we talked about our buddy Mike that also was very high on them. When we spoke to Reegs, he was totally on board with this Wildcat team being really different than the Frosh-heavy teams in the past. Plus, I feel like, you mentioned this, didn't you feel like Coach Cal is ready for his next title? I'm kind of all in on this Kentucky team, and I was all in on them even prior to Maxey and his MSG Magic Act and his performance. I was all in on the lead guard combination that they can bring. So I think Kentucky's going to get there, and I think they have a chance to be the team that wins the whole thing this year.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable. They're just as good as any team that we saw in those first four. So absolutely, I think it's fine.
Next team, you try to get one of the teams that you're not totally locked in with. So I'm going to go with Ohio State. This is one of the teams that always finds its way to the Final Four. They bring back enough pieces. They got Caleb Wesson, the needed big for easy touches and scores in a grinded out game. Just reference the Cincinnati game. That's all you need to see. That one of those games is going to happen in the tournament. You got Luther Muhammad, a Jersey tough guard that plays with no fear and is not going to back down from anybody that he's matched up with in the backcourt. You got Andre Wesson, a multi-skilled wing. Kyle Young is going to get more minutes than you think. Throwing some talented freshmen with Alonzo Gaffney, who's 6'9", DJ Carton, the 6'2" point guard, who's going to get a ton of minutes. EJ Liddell, he made some unbelievable moves against Cincinnati. I was really impressed with him. Throw in the impact transfer of C.J. Walker from Florida State. And I don't think it hurts to have a coach who's vastly underrated and has a ton of talent to work with Chris Holtman. And this is like, think of this as like your 4, 5, or 6 seed that makes the Final Four run. I think it's the Ohio State Buckeyes. So I tried to go a little off the radar there with that pick and not give you just the generic, I think Kentucky and Kansas are going to make the Final Four.
Totally like it. Love it. I love Ohio State. Love the coaching. Love the Wesson brothers inside. Absolutely has all the makings of a team that can make a Final Four. I think it's a brilliant selection.
Okay, here's the one where people might lose their minds and call us crazy. Ready? We all want to find that one team. We all want to find that Loyola Chicago. We all want to find that George Mason. And I was a little bit on this bandwagon last year. And as long as they are healthy, I think there's a shot. I think there's a chance. I think there is a possibility that the Harvard Crimson could make the Final Four. This is a 100% Seth Towns is completely healthy and going to ball out type of reservation. I have that reservation for the selection. If he's not healthy, then I'm going to remove this. I think Towns was an unbelievably gifted shooter, and he was the player of the year in the conference 2 years ago before he was hurt. Bryce Aiken is like a Jordan Ford level type scorer in the Ivy. He put up 38 points against Yale in the Ivy final. Chris Lewis is back as a senior to hold down things inside. We got wings with Kirkwood from Canada and Justin Bassey, who can shoot and create and give that needed room on the offensive end for Towns and Aiken to do their thing on the wings. Kirkwood might even take another step after a really stellar Frost season where he was one of the top freshmen in the country, one of the top freshmen in the league. Danilo, I practice this. Duchacic can do a little bit of everything.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. At 6'8", he can shoot it. He can help on the boards. He can even score at multiple levels. And our favorite guy is Christian Huzang, who can play on the ball or off the ball. He can defend the heck out of any guard in the nation. He's tough as nails, and he's that glue guy that every Final Four team needs. So I'm going way off the reservation here. Again, if Seth Towns is healthy, Harvard is going to be your surprise team in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We love the Ivy, and you love the Ivy as well, and you love Harvard. Okay. I don't see it happening. But listen, I like the spirit of it, which is that there's going to be a team that no one thinks is going to make it that's going to make it. And we've seen Harvard win tournament games many times now. I'm not sure about this one. And again, we went back and forth last year on Yale for a long time. Right. They do, if an Ivy team is going to do it, they are going to have to play defense, which they do. And I do agree with you that I think that Bryce Aiken is a special shot maker. I think he's got the equality. I think he's got the game winning shot type of guy. All right, let's see what happens.
I love that you didn't totally blow me up on that one. That's great.
No, how can I blow? Listen, bro, we've seen VCU make it. Cornell won 2 games. I mean, it's not. Listen, I'm not saying I would pick it, but do I think it's outlandish? No, I don't. Well,
you're being very kind there. I think people are coming to the Screen College Basketball Podcast not for your Michigan State's going to make the Final Four picks. So there's your way outlandish pick.
They got the opposite of that with that pick.
And then I'm going to go a little homer here. I think UNC can make the Final Four again this year. I feel like I've picked them every preseason during our podcast, but I feel like as long as Baycott is going to make his free throws, I think this pick is going to fly. I think Leaky Black can fill the Theo Pinson role on the perimeter, both on offense and defense. I feel like Justin Pierce can get some Cam Johnson, a freedom from the 3-point line, maybe slightly less volume. I feel like they can play 3 lead guards at once. They can play Cole, they can play Leaky, they can play Christian Keeling. Kentucky can play 3 lead guards. They certainly will score enough. Offensive rebounding will still be a factor for them. They can play big if the matchup is warranted. And to be honest, this is like a Cole Anthony pick. I think he just might be that good this year as a lead guard. I think he's going to be as good as Carson Edwards. I think he's going to be good as Kobe White. I think he's going to be good as De'Aaron Fox. I think he's going to be as good as Kyrie was supposed to be during his lone year at Duke, but injuries limited his opportunities for greatness in college and for Duke's success overall. I think Cole's going to put up nutty numbers all year. I think it's going to be tough to stop off the bounce. And if you need to guard him at 25 feet, and find him right away on scramble plays, which UNC is going to run all the time when they run, he's going to be more than crafty enough with the ball to create for others and himself after dismissing and attacking panicked closeouts by other defenders. I think that he's going to just constantly create and make great decisions, and I think he can do that for 6 games to get them to a Final Four.
Yeah, I agree with this one. One of the things that was a lot of things happened last year that I was unsure about, shocked about. I mean, listen, number one, right, of course, Gus, was you and I champion. And folks, if you go back to our podcast feed, we said this was the Tony Bennett redemption tour. We talked about it since as soon as they lost that first round game. Okay. The reason that we kind of jumped off, or I should speak for myself, I was hesitant. And I picked them on an Action Network podcast interview. Stuckey and I did one together, and we went through the bracket and actually picked the bracket, and we had Virginia versus Virginia Tech in the finals. Don't ask. Okay, we just went game by game. It was fine. But it was the way in which, like, every game we thought it was over. Purdue, we thought it was over. Texas Tech, we thought it was over. Even against Bruce Pearl and Auburn, we thought it was over. I mean, we constantly thought,
first round, they were down at the half.
Right. Like, they just didn't look good. That's what it was. But if you asked me mid-season, I would have said Virginia could have won the title. So it's just the way it happened. North Carolina, to me, was a massive disappointment. I just expected them to get going and to get things together, and it never happened. So it would not surprise me if Roy gets it going together this year and gets to the Final Four. So I think this is a fantastic pick.
Yeah, and I think that, again, I was on this prior to the Cole Anthony blow up, his first game, but I think there's enough talent in place there, and there's an interesting recipe of players that Roy gets to mix in and figure out what the right measurements are. I think he's going to get it right. All right, Mike, let's get out of here on a couple things. Let's get out of here on 3 games the listeners can look forward to next week. I'll give you my 2 cents. You give me your 2 cents. On Monday, we got Samford and Belmont. Are you looking forward to the offensive matchup here? Do you think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game?
Yeah, I always want to see how Belmont is going to do. And now, no Rick Byrd, right? He's gone. Right. So I want to see how the adjustment happens with the coach. I have a similar feeling about Michigan with Juwan Howard. And again, in Montana State with a new coach this year, and they actually performed very well. So always good to see these 2 teams. Samford, of course, was in the running last year to be a team that we really like that could maybe sneak in and get hot at the end of the year and make the tournament. So a battle of 2 of our favorites. Absolutely.
No doubt, and with Nick Mazuski in the middle, I think Belmont's going to put up some big numbers as well. Let's go to Tuesday. Let's go Oregon and Memphis. We got 2 ranked teams. We got 2 high-profile programs now with Memphis back in the fold. Mike, you got a feel for the Ducks and Memphis and Penny and his crew led by a freshman, James Wiseman?
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting one because I want to see the talent for Memphis, number one. And I like that they're going against a great coach in Dana Altman. They're going against a great point guard, Peyton Pritchard. And they're going against a team that's going to play solid defense and had success in the tournament and almost be Virginia themselves last year. So I think it's a nice clash of new school, old school, veteran experience versus the young. Like to see it. It's a great stylistic clash is what I'm saying.
I want to see how Peyton Pritchard holds up against the top-end athletes that Memphis is going to throw out at him. I think it's going to be a very telling thing moving forward. If he has an NBA future, I think it's going to paint the picture exactly right away. And to be honest, I want to see Wiseman switch out on Pritchard or Richardson on the perimeter and see if he can guard guys on the perimeter and be a little versatile defensively. I think that's just something I'm looking forward to seeing Wiseman do. We can score it. He can shoot it a little bit. He's going to be a force inside. But I want to see what can he do on the defensive end? Can he, is he switchable? And can he be one of these modern day bigs? I kind of want to see that. And I think this game against Oregon is going to really tell us that. And then Wednesday, Mike, we got LSU, who Reegs really liked for the Final Four, versus VCU, who Brian Mull really liked as a surprise team that could make a run somewhere. So we have 2 under the radar teams that experts really appreciated and really admired facing off on this week, which is bananas.
VCU did not cover in their opening game at home against St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Now, I think St. Francis, Pennsylvania is better than people realize, but it was only
Chief Braxton is a monster. Look out.
It was only 72-58. So I kind of want to see which VCU team is here. Have they taken a step back? Santos Silva's excellent. That's what I'm kind of curious about. You know the style, how they're going to play, and it's always great to see a small school that's going to get up and down the floor with one of your larger schools. So interesting. I like LSU. Want to see how they're going to react, and I want to see if VCU's for real. If that St. Francis win, but it was close for a while, if that says more about VCU or more about St. Francis.
I agree. And of course, Wade coming from the VCU tree and so on and so on. You want to see how that coincides as well. All right, Mike, let's get out of here with two awesome performances in our sport. And this is the perfect way to end the Welcome Back to College Basketball podcast. You got Kalen Bennett of Kent State. He is the first player diagnosed with autism to sign a letter of intent to play D1 basketball. This opening week, Bennett scored the first points of his college career on like an end one on a pretty sweet post move, which was really, really cool. And then we also got the joy of seeing Andrew Jones of Texas seeming like he's fully healthy after putting up 20 points while on the road to recovery from leukemia with the Longhorns. We're going to say cheers to Jones. Cheers to Bennett for finding top-level success in our sport after fighting so many obstacles, so many labels, and so many physical limitations. Like, I'm in legit awe of their efforts, both of those guys. I think it's really cool that our sport has highlights like those that go along with Cole Anthony's and Maxi's that let us in and, will catch our attention. But there's other stories there too, Mike.
It's wonderful stories, perseverance, resiliency, which a lot of young kids don't have nowadays. They give up way too easily. These are wonderful messages that we should teach our children, no matter what they have, no matter what adversity, what obstacles they have in front of them. They can always move forward. Both stories are great. Andrew Jones, fantastic to see him back here. And Bennett is a special kid. Absolutely thrilled for both of them. They are exactly the type of stories that our sport needs to promote more.
All right, listeners, we know this was a meaty one, but Mike and I had to get through a whole bunch of things here. So thank you for riding it through. We hope this provides a commute or two for you on the way to or from work, and we've entertained you and got you ready for the college basketball season and the start line and the excitement that we've had with everything. And if you like what you're listening to, please don't forget to give the podcast a kind review on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Give 5 stars, say nice things about Mike, say nice things about our guests. That'd be awesome. And to be honest, we'll catch up with you before you know it. We got a couple more cool guests lined up, and we'll be in your ears and your earbuds and your speakers, hopefully, and keep you company on another commute with some more college basketball chatter. Sound good, Mike?
Sounds fantastic, man. Can't wait.
All right. Cheers. Cilantro. Gratulati, everybody.